Okay, so this was something added at the last second. Originally there was an intro bit updating things, but I didn't quite feel right having it at the beginning, so I decided to move it till the end. So just thought that I'd have this little thing right here explaining what's happening, but tr- trust me, it all makes sense soon enough. I guess. I don't know. I'm not really good at this kind of stuff, but at least it's another video. That's cool. Anyway, I just wanted to provide that little explanation for what's going on and why this is in the beginning. Anyone who wants to know, of course, updates will always be on my Twitter, so just be on the lookout of that when I'm not shit posting. Anyway, with that, let's get on to the video. It's been a while since I've done a Persona video, let alone a review of one. Hell, if you've been here a while, you'd remember that the first review I ever did was of Persona 4 Golden. And I'm sure if you watched it now, it'd be pretty bad. But I like to think that I've improved since then. And, well, you know, that was about, I don't know, I'd assume like year and a half ago or however long. But that's enough reminiscing. It is time for the now. As a Persona fan, I was a little hesitant to try this game, mainly because there's so many versions that it's hard to choose which one's the right one to play. The original, FES, and portable, each with their own quirks, additions, and omissions that really made it hard for me to decide. Most people played portable, but after asking, I was told FES was a good way to play it, mainly because the answer. And so I did. It was on stream, so yeah. And, like the madman I am, I found a copy of it on PS2, and, well, finally got around to it. At the time of recording this, I finished my initial playthrough of it, like, I don't know, a couple months ago. And I will say it was an interesting experience. There's no real way to explain it, but that's just kind of how I felt. It felt neat, I guess. I want to take this much like my other reviews in the past several, well, actually it'd only be the Yakuza one. Mainly just because I like the way that structure was. So, if it ain't broke, why fix it, you know? I'll try my best to keep everything concise, because covering Persona games with story is kinda difficult. And, as the title says, this will be two different videos. So, in this video, we're going to be covering the original, and then in part 2, we're going to be covering the answer, because, well, I bought this version of the game, might as well cover the extra expansion. So, why the hell not? And we'll just see what happens from there. So, let's do the Persona thing. Persona. Our story begins after watching that weird FES intro that I don't even know has a name. Or you tune in to Burn My Bread. Cross that off the list of common Persona memes. As we transfer to the Iwatadai dorm, it's a dark and surprisingly disgustingly green night. Full moon and coffins, you know, usual stuff. We enter the dorm, and the little boy tells us to sign the guest book. So in this playthrough, we are Tupac Shakur. And then the boy leaves, because he's not real. Only for Yukari Takeba and Mitsuru Kurijo to show up and turn on the lights, as we start getting acquainted with our new living space. The next few days are normal school life stuff, as we get used to it. Then we get a new future party member, Radical Junpei Iori. Man, this is easy. We find out about this thing called the Dark Hour not long after. Basically, whenever it turns midnight, that's when the world turns green and the coffins appear in the road. It's a thing not known to most, aside from those who are special, basically. which means that we awaken to a persona by shooting ourselves with this little gun called an evoker. It's not real. It turns into this other one, but don't worry, it turns into the real one called Orpheus, and then we get a tutorial fight. Next few days after that are normal as Junpei moves in, Akihiko Sanada rejoins after recovering from a plot point injury, as I call it, and we meet Shuji Ikutsuki, who basically oversees the team in the dorm. We get fully informed of the midnight... Is it midnight hour? No, dark hour. Finally fully joining SEAS, the Specialized Extracurricular Execution Squad. And, well, Mitsuru tells us about Tartarus as well, which is basically the Tower of Babel and the main dungeon of the game. After some time in Tartarus, we return and continue our lives before the next full moon, where we have to take on 11 other bosses, each corresponding to the remaining arcana of the tarot. Even though there's 13, but shut up, we'll get there, I swear. And to be honest, there isn't much with story as it varies, it's mostly just build-up. So I feel the best way to cover this from now on is just to hit up the major plot points. I guess no particular order, because sometimes it's hard to remember which events take where, even if you rewatch the footage. So, we get Fuka Yamagishi, who gets stuck in Tartarus with her friend. We save them, and then Fuka becomes our navigator. And Mitsuru joins us, now no longer needing to be the navigator herself. We get introduced to a weird group of people who exterminate others during the Dark Hour, consisting of Revolver Jesus, Boy Chie, and the weird chick wearing a wedding dress, or something. They're known as Strega, and they'll be much important later. Akihiko was visiting the hospital for a while. One of his friends, Shinjiro Adagaki, was a previous member of SEAS. And Aki senses something coming that they will need Shinji's help with, but he isn't having any of it. We take a trip to Mitsuru's family's summer home. Well, basically that's what it is. We find a new party member in the form of Aigis, this robot. We help a Shiba Inu named Koromaru not get murdered, recruit a kindergartner named Kenamata, and even Shinjiro comes back. And, well, that should be it for the most part. I know I'm missing a lot, but it's really hard to explain the story, as I've said before, since it goes back and forth quite often, from major story elements to normal school life, and sometimes nothing can happen for days, even weeks. That's just about the gist of it before getting to the major plot points that we'll cover near the ending, because, well, there's a lot. It's really not bad, per se. I'd say it's quite put together, considering how it's building up all the things we'll need to know. It starts out basic before becoming more complex. The real stuff doesn't become important until around September. Well, we'll get there when we get there. For now, I figure it's time to just talk about the game for a bit, because, it's a game review. It's not fucking story time. Go watch a video essay if you want that.
I've been waiting for this!
This game is separated into 3 different parts, as I like to say. That'd be the school life, Tartarus, and the Velvet Room. We'll take this one step at a time. Tartarus is like an open map labyrinth type thing, where you basically just gotta sneak around a randomly generated maze, avoiding shadows that roam around, and you can even sneak attack them, kinda like Earthbound, if you've played that. It can be hard sometimes, but honestly, those shadows are powerless against stairs, so if you're in a bind, you need to be careful, just go up on one of those hills or like a set of stairs or whatever, and then they'll just turn around, then you can hit them in the back. You'll find stuff like briefcases and even these weird gold chests dug into the ground as you walk about. They'll give you stuff like recovery items, weapons, some yen, so I'd really advise grabbing them if you can. Just, word of advice while walking around. Don't get ambushed. Oh, and don't stay on the floor too long. You'll thank me later. Now on to the main form of combat. For those unattuned to Persona, this is a JRPG in the truest sense of the word. It's actually very similar to the series SMT Roots, which, well, everyone seems to forget that Persona is a spin-off of SMTs, so, I just had to make that known. Everyone has a turn and an order in which they go, as well as weaknesses and resistances, be it fire, electricity, light, dark, and as well as physical moves like slash, blunt, and pierce. It's best to prioritize your strategy with who you bring in, what equipment you give, and what persona the player equips. I both love and hate this battle system for a number of reasons. Let's start with the 2-ton Giramakala in the room, the non-controllable party. I see this as a detriment sometimes, but really good in others. It's mostly one of the biggest complaints people have, not being able to control your party. But, I don't see it too bad. I know why it was made. From what I've read, it was made to make the other party members seem like their own people and focus on the main character. But their AI really isn't that great. It can screw you over in a lot of situations. They will do anything and everything because, well, they don't know most of the time. And once you get the ability scan, well, sometimes you don't scan things enough, and so the party will just waste their HP or SP, which is vital in certain situations. But what I do appreciate is that it is another element of strategy, changing who you may want to bring in per battle. That way, every weakness can be as covered as possible. I just run into issues when I bring in Marin Karen and she spams Mitsuru. Man, I'm just running through these today. Almost done with this list. Not to mention the introduction of Shuffle Time. In specific circumstances, you'll get access to a little memory game of sorts. You can get access to stuff like more XP, some free yen, a free heal, a weapon, and even some new personas. This is where you'll get most of your cash, that and treasure chests, because, well, they really don't drop much in battle, so you kind of want to take advantage of that. Now, there is one game mechanic that ties into battle as well, and it really irks me more than it should. And that is the tired system. Okay, where do I start? There's this invisible meter in the game, only indicated by this little smiley face that appears right next to your icon, like your stats, like your health and whatnot. And after a certain amount of fights, you and your party members will get tired. There is several things that this does. This makes everyone miss attacks more, lowers their attack and defense by default, not through like a skill, it just makes them noticeably weaker, and, well, more susceptible to getting hit, as well as having them leave when you return to the starting area, which I normally use to heal up, and I'm sure everyone else probably used it too. Allegedly, you get less tired the more you level up, which, if it does, yeah, that makes sense. But you gotta be careful, and there's no item that helps reduce tiredness as well. There's no way of knowing how close you are to becoming great or in between good, so it just happens, and if you're not careful, it can really ruin a good run through Tartarus and actually kind of like end your little grinding, so you kinda gotta take it as you will. Another aspect of this game is the Velvet Room. Now, if you've played a Persona game, it's the same. But for those who haven't, and surprisingly, you'd be surprised how many people haven't, here's what you can do. You can fuse different personas that you get on the field and create new ones. That's really the main thing. You start off with a combination of 2 and 3, but as you progress through the game, you can fuse up to a max of 6. Each persona has a different number of combinations, with each arcana to like fuse a different one, and you have so many options. Who can forget iconic personas like Jack Frost, Hecatoncheires, Pixie, Kira Makala, and Mara? Yeah, that one. Not only can you fuse new personas, you have access to the entire list of personas that you create or recruit on the field. But there's a big issue with this. Just like a really nice figurine you want, it's goddamn expensive. Look, I played this for a while, and to my knowledge, there is no discount, or at least it's very minimal, so you will have to grind a lot of money if you want a certain persona and you don't have enough for the certain kind it needs. And honestly, a problem with that grind is the tired mechanic. You can only do so much, so you better do the requirements for shuffle time, which even I still don't understand, and you better take as much money as you can. Then you can just get more personas for free and you can just fuse those together, and honestly, you'll be relatively fine without the compendium a lot of the times. But also in the Velvet Room, you can talk to Elizabeth, this game's attendant. She's an eccentric little goblin lady who I love, she's great, and gives you access to the compendium I mentioned earlier. Not only that, but she has requests you can take on. These are basically side quests you can do in Tartarus, ranging from finding a certain item, whether there or in the real world, to stuff like fusing a certain persona with a specific move, or even take Elizabeth outside on a date of sorts. Some of them you don't get much from, like you'll get a crappy weapon or something, but there are some of them that are worth it. You can get new persona recipes, a decent weapon depending on when you do it, even some crafting materials, which I will explain what those are later on, and you even get some really good items like a soma or some beads and even bead chains, I believe. I don't know what you get for completing all the requests. Honestly, I don't want to look it up nor do it, because this game's super long and I don't really want to replay the games. Let's just move on. And finally, we have the school life, as it's called. This is the first time we get a lot of activities. Stuff like eating, after-school clubs, social stats, all that stuff, you know? Around the entirety of Tatsumi Port Island, you get access to a few different areas, each granting different things to do. You have the school, obviously, where you can do clubs and whatnot. Outside there's the Palania Mall with Club Escapade, Chagall Cafe, Mandragora, and Game Panic Arcade, all mainly stat boosting stuff, which, note, go to Game Panic. It's literally the best way to max out your social stats. You also have Bebluvi for accessories, the police station where you buy weapons from a very intimidating yet helpful officer who will give you a discount on a good day of his, Shin Shodo for trading gems, which you get in Tartarus, stuff like diamonds, rubies, emeralds, all that stuff. And then you can also fuse personas into empty weapons. So, you know, take advantage of that. There's also a pharmacy for you to get healing items and such, which has a sale every Saturday, so keep that in mind. There's also the shrine, where you can improve your academics mostly. You can improve an S-Link or turn a crappy item into a possibly slightly better one. Port Island Station has a theater and a flower shop. Then Iwatsutai Station has 2 bookstores and a surplus of food joints that offer various effects when visited. Each of these take up your day or night depending on when you visit, so choose what you do wisely. And that time aspect is something that I've always respected within the series, and you know what, I'm glad that they've kept it.
Mano a mano.
Social links, or S-links, is basically the getting to know you, getting to know all about you, the game mechanic. I want to give this its own segment here, because it's so pivotal to what Persona will become, and part of the stigma and will be known to some. But you can talk to a number of classmates like Yukari, Mitsuru, or Chihiro of the student council, whether they're in a club or outside of one, as well as people outside like Mutatsu the monk in Club Escapade, Maiko, this little girl at the shrine who's very depressed, and Tanaka in Palania Mall. Each conversation normally having a set amount of responses, and you gotta guess the right one. And when you guess correct, you get a little boost that makes accessing the next step easier. This can also be boosted by having a persona related to that character's arcana that each one is assigned. So for someone like Mutatsu, he's of the tower, Yukari is lovers, and then Frenchie over here is temperance, and so on and so forth. It's a great way to wind down and build the world and its characters while interspersing it with the main plot. There's a couple of issues I have regarding this though. Most of the S-Links, and I mean like 80% of them or so, are in the school, and you can only access them at the school. So if you have a day off, or it's a holiday break, you can go fuck yourself right there. This is something they fixed in Persona 4 onwards, but it bothers me a little bit here, because it gives you less to do, and you already don't have that much to do, even though I explained a lot. Number 2, you get S-Links for Yukari, Mitsuru, and Fuka, but in order to get them, you need to max your social stats, that being Charm, Intelligence, and Courage respectively. This is an issue if you're playing casually and don't have time to take from other S-links you're doing to go raise those stats. Again, another issue fixed later on where it's more gradual, but it really bogs it down here. There's also a few other mechanics with it, like a social link can reverse or even break. They do this less as the series goes on, but I kind of find it interesting. It only happened to me once where it stagnated with Yukari, but I don't know, it's really neat. Other than that, I kind of like the system and glad to see where it took its roots from initially.
Let me at him!
Let's be honest, this is something that really doesn't deserve its own little section of the video, but honestly, I'll never get a chance to talk about this so in-depth again. So let's talk about the characters for a bit. You got people from the main cast, or even people from the social links. Except you, fatty. I'll say it here, and I'll say it again for as long as it takes. These are some of the best written characters in these series, if you ask me. Sure, a lot of them will fall into cliches for the most part, but they don't really rely on them too much. Or at least they give them a decent way to use it. Aside from the living cardboard cutout that is your main character, who won't give a shit about anything, you got some real good stuff here. You got Junpei, who's your hot-headed bro-type character. He's always trying to hit on the ladies when he can, tends to compete with you due to his, well, general hot-headedness. By the end of the game, he learns to mellow out a bit and find meaning and importance within himself, which he doesn't really have for a good chunk of the game. Yukari is a character who may act like a bitch at times. She's pretty bubbly and caring to a lot of people, all except herself. She's constantly dealing with the grief of the death of her father and feeling like her family doesn't love her, but she doesn't really know the truth, and it's actually a major part of the story, which I can appreciate. Mitsuru is the heiress of the illustrious Kirijo group, and for those who played Persona 5, the story significance and her S-Link pretty much follows Haru a little bit. A bit more elaborated, which kind of intrigues me. Not the whole, like, fiancé thing and the story relevance, but, you know, just the general idea of it. Mitsuru is very regal, composed, but naive to most social cues. Her arc is dealing with the shadows with her father, and the S-Link deals with her taking over the company, and the freedom of love when she's in an arranged marriage she's assigned to. Fuka's a very sheltered and reserved kind of girl, with a quiet, shrill voice when she talks. She deals with her own insecurities as a person, wanting to feel more useful to the team, as well as coming out of her shell and opening up to people more. Which, honestly, a lot of people can find very relatable. Akihiko is your sportsman. He's always about his training and boxing. But he's like this due to some events from the past, and he doesn't want them to happen again. Showing him having a hard time moving on, really. Which adds to the depth of his character. Makes him arguably my favorite out of the main cast. Ken's a kindergartner who wants to act more mature and needs to learn that sometimes a kid can be a kid. As well as dealing with the grief of losing his mother years ago and searching for the son of a bitch who did it for, you know, revenge purposes. Koromaru is... well, he's best boy. He's a good little pupper. Finally, Aigis. She's a robot. She's an anti-shadow weapon, dealing with conflicting feelings. Ones that would normally go against her general programming. She wonders what it means to be human, and feeling more and more what it's like to feel that way, to be human. It's a nice little arc for a character like this, and honestly, while most shows or anything really would make this kind of a nuisance, it really doesn't get on my nerves. You also got characters like Maiko, this little girl at the shrine, who has her parents getting divorced, and even further in her S-Link, she plans to run away. Mutatsu the monk in Club Escapade seems like a grumpy old man who smokes and drinks, bitter at the world and the loss of respect and integrity with the youths today. But he actually just turns to be a broken man who hasn't really spoken to his family since his divorce. He shows very much regret. Mamoru is a track all-star the town loves. He's got scholarships, he gets free meals that helps with his training, but he feels like he wants to attain success on his own and help out his family a bit more. He feels a bit guilty about it, and it's not really all that bad. There's so many more, but honestly, this is going on way too long. To be honest, it's all great. I didn't get all the time in the world to do all the social links, but there's some good stuff here if you find it. You're bound to find someone or something to enjoy. Just don't do the Moon S-Link. He's the worst and has no real redeeming character whatsoever, even by the end. Worst mistake of my life.
The enemy!
Alright, really quick, now we're entering spoiler territory. From here on to the final moments of the vid, basically. I'll leave a timestamp somewhere, or you can check the little bar or whatever when I separate this into chapters. So, if you haven't played Persona 3 at all, I'd say do so. Then come back in about several days or even months when you forget what you're watching and then move on to something else. Do this by either emulating FES or the easier and more accessible Portable. Who cares? I don't. Alright. Anyways, the story, which, like I said earlier, picks up around September. We're gonna go bullet point through this again, sort of speedrun it. Junpei becomes acquainted with one of the members of Strega, Chidori, without knowing who she is. She traps Junpei on the roof in August's full moon operation, and from then on we learn of Persona suppressants, which were made to artificially contain a power that hasn't fully been harnessed, so people like Strega and even Shinjiro used it. Once Ken joins, Shinjiro has a reason to come back to the team, temporarily. Once the full moon comes around that time, we find Shinji and Ken in an alleyway discussing things, but not before Revolver Jesus shows up to take out the trash. It's revealed that Shinjiro, during an operation 3 years ago, killed Ken's mother, which was partially on accident, but it had to be done, I guess. And Ken hasn't forgotten, while Shinji wants to atone for what he did. And so, he sacrifices himself in typical Japanese storytelling fashion. And Ken never really got his revenge, and he's all pissed about it. This is arguably my favorite part of the game. I mean, like most of these games have the party getting over it in a single cutscene or after several days. This one lasts a while, and you get to see how everyone views Shinjiro's death. Giving Akihiko one of the best moments in the game, it definitely made me respect Liam O'Brien as an actor. Even more than I already did. He fucking killed it here. This also starts characters getting awakenings to their persona, reflecting their growth as people. So, for Aki, he gets Caesar. And you get stuff like Trismegistus, Artemisia, yada yada yada. Things continue as normal. We take on the shadows, and we finally get a Strega fight on the last night. And things are nah, I'm not doing that bit again. There was enough of the fake ending thing in the Persona 4 vid. The Dark Hour is still around, even though we were told after eliminating the 12 shadows would do so. And with Aigis and Akutsuki missing, something is up. We head to Tartarus and find both of them there. Akutsuki wanted to have the shadows defeated so death can be brought forth for creepy science experiments, I'm pretty sure. Mitsuru's dad isn't having none of it, so he shoots Akutsuki while dying himself. Aigis defects from the mind control, and everyone's sad. So with the guy supervising the whole team dead, and basically the entire guy running the operation, the team is in shambles and no one knows what to do. During all this, we get our final visit from that little boy from earlier, which I neglected to mention, but don't worry, it's really not important till now. This little boy's name is Pharos, and he will become more important in a second. Also, a new kid shows up, named Ryoji Mochizuki. He's a popular pretty boy, but Aigis thinks he's very sus. Some time passes and we get a signal from Strega, but it's neither Jin nor Takaya. So, we get the easiest boss fight in Persona history, to my knowledge, and Junpei dies. Before Chihiro uses her funky cold Medea to bring him back to life. She's basically a living Phoenix Down. Some time passes as Junpei starts acting very depressed and moody after losing a girl when he was starting to develop feelings. Then he bucks up and is ready to go back into the fight. Soon after, Aigis is getting more suspicious about Ryoji by the second, returning to the dorm super late and such these days. New Year's comes and we see Aigis on the bridge with Ryoji. It gets revealed that Ryoji is death itself. He takes on the form of Thanatos, which is basically like, I don't know, like Death's secretary in this world, whatever. And also that, he was sealed inside ourselves, the main character. And, oh, guess what? The little boy was us the whole time. Oh my god, it's so fucking confusing. We have till December 31st to decide whether to kill him or not. We choose not to, and so comes Nyx, the bringer of death, who is said to be unkillable. Yeah, if you've played an SMT or even Persona game, yeah, you know how this goes. So, we have until January 31st before Nyx comes, and so brings about the end of the world. This puts the team in fear, but at ease, because they're confident that Nyx can be defeated. Meanwhile, the rest of the world is either fearing the idea of incoming death, while others, in a cult led by Takaya, embraces it. Yeah, it's a real thing. Now, we're in the final month of the game. Once that day arrives, we have one more boss fight with Jin and Takaya, and then we reach Nyx at the very tippy top of Tartarus, one of the longest fights in any RPG ever. And then we move on. Alright, look, I didn't initially play this on stream, we just kind of just skip past the ending because it was hard, but trust me, I beat it, and it's really cool. But it's now March, the party celebrates graduation day, everyone's memories of what happened gone. But not before the promise they all made to each other makes their memories come back. They all meet up at the roof. The protagonist lays on Aegis's lap, sleepy, finally falling completely asleep as the party shows up in the last moments, and so ends Persona 3. Honestly, I really like this ending. Even knowing what happens thanks to Burn My Dread, telling you all that's gonna happen, I think it's played out very, very well. Quick tangent. I also like how the game interprets the meaning of death, whether accepting death, like in most people's cases, or the fear of death, the fear of dying, a fear of loss even, which is a kind of death that you can deal with in its own right. Everyone deals with it in their own way, and it's really powerful, and honestly, they don't play around with it, they go straight for the core. You know, because most games would try to dance around the fact of the idea of death and the way of dealing with it, or just embracing it. But this game does it in a real mature way that I can really respect and appreciate from any kind of standpoint, to be honest. Persona 3 is an interesting game. While it does some things I do like, it really takes a while for the story to get interesting. It's kind of a slow burn, to be honest. And this is coming from a guy that plays Yakuza games. That series is all about your slow burns. But this one just feels incredibly slow, and I didn't really start getting invested till, well, at least the 3/4 mark of the game. I don't know, it's a very controversial take, you know, since people have a lot of nostalgia for this, and some of them even say, like, the Second Coming of Christ, one of the greatest RPGs ever. Wait a minute, this sounds familiar. Did I say this about Persona 5 as well? Whatever. I only bring it up because that's just people's favorite part of the game a lot of the time, and that's what they say it's one of the best. But I don't know, I just couldn't really get into it, per se. Not to say that it's a bad game. It does what it does well. I just think the subsequent entries do things a bit better. There's still some things I can truly appreciate that make it stand out, though. In my opinion, it does have the best written and developed characters out of the main number of entries. Even with 4, and that's my favorite. Calm down, I'll get to Persona 1 and 2 eventually. So, before you start making angry comments and that, just relax. I also do love the hip-hop and R&B inspired soundtrack the game takes on. Stuff like Iwatsurai Dorm and that song that plays in Club Escapade. Those are the kind of tracks I really like to vibe to. There's a lot of vibe tracks, you know? A lot of beats, a lot of percussion. And, well, of course it mixes it up having some rock tracks in there, but I really like the urban feel to it. As hard as a time I had playing this, the difficulty didn't really stop me that much from having a good time. And to be honest, I always love the satisfaction of finding an enemy's weakness in battle, and even a boss if it has it. Albeit I cheated a bit during a lot of it, but shut up. Sometimes it's really not what it is in other games, so my knowledge was turned upside down. Leave me alone. Though bosses like the sleeping table and some other bastards near the end really gave me a tough time. Ended up putting a downer on some of the experience, but you know. Word of advice, don't play hard on your first playthrough. This game is it's not forgiving. Even still, I think the game's fine, just not really what I wanted, I guess. That's probably the best way to describe it. But don't let my words and opinions detract you from any experience you may already have with this or want to. If you really want to play it, you can emulate FES or you can emulate Portable. Portable's arguably easier. It's on the PSP. That's literally one of the easiest systems to emulate. Or you could just wait 50 years for Atlas to port this over in some sort of definitive edition with every kind of mode jumbled together and the true way to play it. Which I'm surprised they haven't really done, let alone just port the normal version. Then again, I guess Atlas hates money. As you can see by their anniversary when they barely revealed any games. Just more merch. Side ran over. I still think it's worthwhile to check out, either as a fan of a series or, well, even a newcomer, just so you can see what it's all about, and the origin of some of the mechanics that you'll get to know better and other people praise in later games. But that's just it. That's Persona 3, a fine game, just not one I find all that great as everyone else does. Now that we're done with the main game, it's time for the other part of FES. It's time to tackle the answer. On the next episode of Persona 3. Now, for anyone asking where is Yakuza, well, there's a simple explanation for that. And that explanation being, well, I made a video about it on Twitter. I'll leave the link to that in the description. It's like 2 minutes, so you can just watch it. But, basically, all that's new from it is that we now have a Ko-Fi. I decided to just bite the bullet, make that, and it'll be promoted in these longer form videos like this, or any of the Yakuza videos, just any of these review type stuff. The reviews, the rankings, whatever I tend to do.